Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience in holding. We now have your speakers in conference. Please be aware each of your lines is in a listen-only mode. You may submit your questions or comments at any time during today's presentation by using the chat window located to the bottom right of the slideshow presentation. Please also note that during today's presentation, we'll be introducing a poll, and for your answer on the poll to count, you need to click the circle next to the answer that you wish to submit. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Chris Hund. Please go ahead, sir.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to the July 2020 AHA Team Training Webinar. This one is Team Overboard, how to get your team back in the boat. Very, I think, timely with what's going on right now in the world. This is Chris Hund, Senior Director with the Center for Health Innovation at the American Hospital Association and Director of AHA Team Training. Special thank you to CareRev, who is sponsoring today's webinar, and you'll hear more from them in a couple of moments. Just some quick rules of engagement. You can listen to the audio for this webinar in two different ways. Just make sure that if you're listening to it via your phone, you mute your computer speakers, or you can listen to it just through your computer. All hyperlinks on the screen are active if you click them, and we'll take you to the web page, and we'll do a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So what we like to do with this is we like you to chat in your questions in the chat box on the screen, and we'll collect those questions, and we will do a curated Q&A at the end. If for some reason we don't answer one of your questions, we are going to have the ability to answer them another way, and I'll talk about that in a second. Continuing education credit, I guess the big thing that you want to do with continuing education credit is to create a Duke OneLink account and confirm your mobile number if you've not already done so. Instructions on how to do this are in the file pod. Then you must text the code that's on our screen right now to the number on the screen within 24 hours of the webinar. And this is 24 hours at the end of the webinar. So don't do it right now. Wait till the end of the webinar, and then you have a day to do so. So that's a big thing to remember right there with that. Upcoming events. So the big thing here is the live Q&A chat on Mighty Network. You could join Mighty Network to continue this conversation with our webinar speakers tomorrow, 11 to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So this will be a text-based discussion, no slides, presentation, just an online chat. And if we don't get to all your questions, this is a great way to continue the conversation with Jan and Rhonda. Our next webinar is Come On, Not Another Initiative, Taking Team Steps into Just Culture and HROs. And that's in August 12th from 1 o'clock 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. All right, without any further ado, I want to introduce Craig Ahrens from CareRev, who's sponsoring today's webinar. Craig?
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on the area of country that you're in. And I really am very pleased today that we're able to sponsor this. I'm a former healthcare executive and consulting leader. I've been in the healthcare industry for over 20 plus years, and about, I'd say, just before COVID, about a month before, I decided to join this technology solution company out of California. They were growing rapidly, and I saw them as a way to build resilience in an organization, basically the ability to withstand or recover and really helping your clinical workforce teams bounce back and augment them in an effective way. And for lack of a better word, what we do is we Uberize or help offer different ways of engaging your current staff as well as local per diem staff, that we build a marketplace pool in your market so that you can be a more flexible, efficient, and more engaged way to serve the needs of your patients. And how we do that is, and how we help you during this unique time, is that basically, you know, a lot of people are being laid off. There are furloughs, there are staffing shortages in unique specialties like ICU, and a lot of organizations are deeply affected by this uncertainty And what better way of engaging people differently than bringing in people as they're needed that are going through these difficult times, engaging them, having them staff, and finding these people competencies that are not being used. We saw it in New York. We're seeing it in Miami where we have these travelers come in and they're useful, but there are people that are sitting on the bench that want to work and want to help. And we offer a platform that's able to do that not only with your internal staff, but also external staff. And we're very pleased to help build resilient organizations. And today you're going to learn more from Jan and Rhonda, and I really appreciate any sort of communication and learning more from them. And if you guys have questions, feel free to email me. My contact information is on the slide about how we can help you as well. Now I'll turn it back over to Chris, and thank you so much. Enjoy your presentation.
Craig, thank you so much for that, and thanks to CareRev again for sponsoring today's webinar. Okay, today's presenters are our two AHA team training stalwarts. We love to have them. We have Jan Brauer, Clinical Education Coordinator from Providence Hood River Memorial Hospital, and Rhonda Fischer, the Trauma Nurse Coordinator, also at Providence Hood River Memorial Hospital. I always comment about how much I love their pictures and how I wish I could be exactly where they are in those pictures because it looks great. So without anything else, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Good morning, this is Jan, and we're going to be talking today about our topic today is Team Overboard, how to get your team back in the boat. One thing Rhonda and I have noticed is this recent, let's call it a tsunami, this recent tsunami of stress and change, and it could be COVID, it could be a new manager, it could be furloughed staff. This tsunami that has happened to healthcare means that we are in a brand new place. And what we're interested today is to look at how to get your team from this fractured, in the water, swimming as hard as they can, back into a team framework and pulling together for safety.
So good morning, this is Rhonda. Let me just tell you what our objectives are today. So our hope is that by the end of the presentation, you'll be able to recognize the current state of your team's engagement and be able to identify at least 2 steps to help your team regain its momentum. And learning tools of resilience to prepare for the next challenge is always a worthy goal these days for whatever piece of learning that we're doing. So that's where we're going today. So just starting out here, Jan and I don't live very far from the Oregon coast, and every year there are at least a couple of significant incidents involving sneaker waves. Nobody expects them. You're just splashing along, minding your own business, and this wave seems to come out of nowhere with this incredible riptide that threatens to pull you out to sea. Now, I got to tell you, this is exactly how the pandemic has felt to me as I've watched it play out in my team at work. We were completely sidelined by this sneaker wave called COVID-19. So just like a real riptide, there were some really big, visible waves in front of us. Things like our teams and workflows were interrupted. Our PPE was in short supply and required a new approach. Even things like figuring out how to eat and take bathroom breaks became big issues. So we had all of these large, visible waves. But similar to an ocean riptide, the greater force that was trying to pull us off course was happening underneath the surface where you couldn't easily identify it. So because of that, it was harder to counter its effects. So this unseen undercurrent, like leaders who employed a crisis management style, the front line, which lost their voice, staff that succumbed to change fatigue, which revealed itself mainly as anger and pushback, right, on everything from workflows to attitudes. So the hard thing about a sneaker wave, whether that's in real life on the beach or in our workplace, the hard thing is that in our concern or our grief, we give way to blame. Why didn't that lifeguard warn us? How come there are no signs posted? What were they doing swimming out there anyway? And that same thing happens when a sneaker wave happens at work. Everyone can find a they to blame for the riptide's untoward effects. But what Jan and I certainly know to be true is that pointing the finger and casting blame on people cannot change the past, certainly not helpful for the present, and it actually will work to sabotage your future success. So what we would like to know is, has something like this ever happened to you or your team? Certainly the pandemic is an easy grab right now, but it could be a change in leadership or a staffing shortage or any number of things. So we would love it if you would put into the chat box right now, just take a minute and start typing away what kinds of things are bumping your team off course.
So while you're typing in, and we're doing this together. Rhonda and I do everything as a team, so Rhonda's going to be reading your answers. Thank you so much. But I want to remind you about team development, team identity, team momentum is really like the tide coming in. The tide doesn't come all in at once. It isn't out and then it's in. It comes in towards the shore and then goes back out and then comes farther into the shore and then goes back out. What happened in this recent challenges is that we went way out to sea. And this talk is all about bringing people back in towards shore, but it really will be tide coming in step by step by step. So the next thing we want to know from you is about where is your team. As you look at your team, I want you to be thoughtful about where you are, but I really want to know about where your team is, because in any recovery process, you need to start where you are. So what I've noticed in this process of coming back to shore is that everybody's been all over the map. And as I've done leadership grounding in our environment, I've seen individuals and units in different parts of the process. So what I'd like you to think about is, where is my team in this process? Are we still in number one, the shock, like, oh my goodness, what just happened to me? And I would say in states like Texas or Arizona, these pressure points, Florida, these pressure points right now, you might have moved past this and now you're back into number one. So recognize that it's, again, the tide coming in. You may have progressed in a different place, and now because you had a surge or you're under crisis management again, you're back into a different number. So number one is shock. What happened to me? I didn't know. It's a sneaker wave. I'm really disoriented. Number two is denial. I'm okay. You know, gosh, this is just going to be for a short time. I'm like, no big deal, or head in the sand. I don't care. I'm not gonna worry about it. This doesn't affect me. And again, it might really vary where you are in the country right now and some of the stressors that you're experiencing personally. Number three is disengaged. And engagement means that I am leaning into the team. I'm pulling forward for the team. I'm interested in my role in solutions. That's engaged. Disengaged means your give a darn is broken. And at the very best, you're swiping your badge and coming in. And at the very worst, you're tearing down the team in four, protest. These protests are like what Rhonda mentioned, is like blame, they, I won't, I'll never. This really verbal anger expression can really rip apart your team. It really only takes one per shift to tear down the team morale and keep blowing apart your team dynamic. And number five is beginning to be in solution management. So, Jen, I'd love for you to put up the polling opportunity, and Jen from AHA is going to pull up the opportunity here, and I'd like you to vote. Could you please let us know where your team is? That would be really helpful going forward. And as you look at this, I want you to be thinking about, am I alone? And you'll see as the numbers continue to grow, as people get a chance to chime in there, that you're actually not alone in this journey of recovery and rejuvenating and getting people into the boat again. So we'll just give that one more little moment. And again, you might have been doing really good in your solution management, and then you hit a surge, you hit another bump, that it was layer and layer upon what you were hoping for. So keep voting, and we'll go ahead and move on in our content, but don't be afraid to just keep voting on that. So where are we going to go for the rest of our time? The rest of our time, we're going to be looking at 3 things to think about. I want to just be upfront with you. Rhonda and I love team dynamics. It's a really important thing, and we know what to watch for. And I want to share with you some of the things we're watching for. We are not experts. We're all doing this, like Brene Brown says, for the first time together. And so these are just buckets of things to think about. And again, start where your team is. So number 1, we're going to look at compassion. It's always a good thing to start with. Compassion means that I'm going to stop long enough to hear where your heart is, hear what's bothering you. I'm going to slow things down, and I'm going to listen and take notes and be present with you in this hard time. Number 2, we're going to look at beginning to rebuild your team confidence. And how do you get your momentum to start back? When organizations or individuals are stuck, it's actually helpful to begin to be intentional about rebuilding confidence. And then lastly, we're going to talk about resilience and the long-term strategies, leadership strategies to put challenge back into your team and make that a forward-moving, resilient team again.
Okay, so starting with compassion. Getting your team back in the boat has to start with compassion, not just for the people, but for the process as well. If your team's boat has been capsized, it doesn't do any good to the point at the horizon and say, look, there it is. I can see land out there. Quite frankly, your team isn't going to care about your long-term goal if you don't show some compassion and solution for their short-term problem, AKA they're drowning. So compassion, in my mind, really lowers the lifeboat. It says, I see you, and I care about your world. You're worth saving. So what does lowering the lifeboat of compassion look like in practicality? Well, first of all, we've got to acknowledge their loss and give them permission to grieve it. What your team has been through is really hard. It's required a great deal from them. In the example of the pandemic, for example, some of your staff are grieving the actual loss of loved ones. And certainly we're all grieving the loss of life as we once knew it. And that includes in the workplace. One nurse that I work with, she's probably about 5 years, has about 5 years left in her career. And the other day she said, I don't think I can finish my 40-year career in a mask. Your team is saying, this is hard. I don't like this. And really what's percolating under the surface for many of them is this fear of, I'm not sure I'm going to make the curve. So if you want your team back in the boat, you've got to start by just validating their experience and its impact on them. Acknowledge their losses and find ways to allow them to grieve it in practical ways like a group debrief or just intentional personal touch points where you commit to just being with your staff and listening while they process. You really don't have to have all the answers. I think some of you may be hiding around the corner as leaders, kind of afraid that something's going to pop up that you're going to have absolutely no idea. Honestly, you don't have to have all the answers. Just let them know you're with them in the boat. Secondly, some of your team might just need a time out. I love this picture. This is where I'd like to take a time out. So some of your folks, let's face it, they've been pushed to the brink. Physically, emotionally, relationally, maybe financially. They need safe haven, a place where they can rest and regroup. So how can we do that for them in practicality again? How do we take this from a concept into the day-to-day boots on the ground interactions with our staff? So one of the things that comes right to mind to me is to have an extra measure of grace for their humanity. Your people have been in crisis mode. It may take a while to get them firing on all four cylinders again. They may not be the solution-oriented, effective team member they've been in the past. That's okay. They'll get there. Have a little patience and continue to speak out your confidence in them. Words create worlds. If you want your team to rise up and be confident again, start speaking that over them. The fact that you just believe in them in spite of these bumps that you've encountered. Being grateful is so important. Be grateful for your team and do it out loud. Don't just expect that they know, that they should just assume that you're grateful for what they've done and who they are in the process of this crisis that you've been through. Everybody needs to be recognized and appreciated for a job well done out loud. Every one of them, even your stinkers, every one of them at some point or another has uniquely contributed to the team and its success. And I want to tell you, it goes a long way in replenishing their trust bank when you can give genuine recognition and appreciation for that. And then be intentional about celebrating what they've done and what they are doing well in the midst of this upheaval. Come on, if you look, there have been successes birthed through just this need for creativity and ingenuity. Situational leaders have emerged. Team synergy has surfaced at critical moments. Celebrate those things. It's super important. And then finally, when I think about providing safe haven for my team, one of the best pieces of leadership advice I ever received was to say yes whenever you can. There will be enough situations where you will have to say no. So purpose to say yes just as often as you can. I think that's particularly important when you've got a burned out team, or maybe just a team that's been burned. So have you got any give when it comes to going ahead and granting that PTO? Can you let them be creative with their scheduling? Do you have any flexibility to give them a little more control over their processes or which new project to start? Think outside the box and ask yourself, is there any way for me to say yes to what they would perceive as providing them safe haven? And then lastly, compassion means being brave enough to go first when there's mop-up to be done. If you or your team has just been through a situation that's capsized the boat, chances are there's some things that you could have done better or you would do differently if you had the chance to start back over again. Own it. Just own it. Be the first to show up with the mop and just say, I'm sorry that didn't go well. Would you forgive me for being reactionary? I apologize for not recognizing your need. Whatever it may be, owning your humanity lets them know that you're with them in the boat.
Confidence. Before we move on to confidence, I want to just review a little bit about what we learned from you. It looks like your challenges are about furlough, documentation, leadership change. Sometimes the challenge is weather-related, turnover, burnout, competing priorities, the process changes, too much change, too little communication, and disengagement. The other thing I learned by watching your scoring and the chat box was that a lot of you are stressed by the differences in the leadership perspective and the team perspective. And some of you had maybe some challenges scoring about the idea about, like, where I am is different where my team is. So let's be thoughtful that as we are leaders, you are a leader in any part of the position that you are. You could be a situational leader as a frontline staff. You could be a leader of one unit. You could be a leader of a whole department. And each unit has its own process of coming back to the beach. So let's talk about confidence. I love to whitewater raft. I'm not that good about it, but I love water sports. And when the raft guide, who sits in the back of the boat, it sees white water up ahead, what they do is that they ask everyone to put their paddle in. They ask everyone to build stability by putting one paddle in and paddling a little bit. So this is what we're going to talk about as we look to rebuild confidence that maybe got blown apart by something you could or couldn't control. And so getting people back into that leaning in, engaged part, which is one paddle at a time.
So let's talk about some tools for resilience. When you want to build confidence back into your team, sometimes it helps to just go back to basics because the obvious is probably actually more essential than you think. So just a debrief. First of all, and I think maybe most importantly, when you're trying to get your team back in the boat, the debrief can help highlight what truly did go or is going well. So here's what happens when the sea's rocking the boat. It's easy to get tunnel vision on what's wrong, what's going wrong. And the thing that I love about a good debrief is it actually brings that wonderful thing we call perspective. It gives the opportunity for people to just gain awareness and perspective on the many things that are actually going right. So being able to identify the wins that are most certainly present, that's a great way to build some critical momentum for what's next on the horizon. And then secondly, giving people an opportunity to express what isn't going so well is a great way to help them process the grief that we talked about earlier. Pain needs a voice. And the debrief is a safe, structured place for them to be able to embrace this change because they've had a moment to release the loss that they felt as they lost the safe and familiar. So a debrief can just be a great platform to process those emotions in constructive ways with the support of others who know exactly what it feels like to be in the boat. So, and then lastly, debriefs, that's that place, that safe place to go, okay, so let's drill the thing down. Let's see what we could actually do differently. How can we move our team from an emotional reaction into the place of a proactive response? Groupthink is powerful when it comes to moving the team forward. And here's my personal goal for a debrief. I think that a debrief should leave your team with a profound sense of hope. That not only can they weather this storm, they can actually be a driving force in steering a new course. All of that just from boiling it back to basics with a simple debrief.
One of the things that happens when we move into crisis management is that we forget to ask for solutions. What happens in crisis management is that we go to back to a tiered, top-down management. We get clear, concise directives that need to be executed today because we need to spin on a dime because it's really going haywire. When that happens, we often forget the resilience tool of asking for solutions. Now, ask asking for solutions do a couple things. It helps the team regain their confidence, but it also, you as a leader, gives you lots of information you didn't have, that there's no possible way that you can have it. I noticed when we revert from frontline up, which is the brief safety huddles, and then it trickles up, we have those, but we also have those other pieces that are top down. And when we go into crisis, the top down really squelches out this time. You have lack of time to ask for solutions. Let me remind you, the front line has the solutions you need. It doesn't have to rest on the leadership shoulders solely. You can ask the team, how do you want to solve this? We haven't had this before. What do you want to do about this? Who would like to lead this project? You are there to mine the talent on your team. If you get them into that solution, they will put their paddle in the water and be able to drive the team forward in ways you could not imagine. Really work on your questioning skills. So what do you think? What do you mean to think? What do you mean to say? What would drive it forward? What's your opinion? Any of those are great tools to be thoughtful about this stage of getting your team re-engaged.
So mutual support. Okay, I have to tell you, in all my years of doing team training and teaching team steps, mutual support is my favorite module because I'm a firm believer that I only get to the goal when we get to the goal. So, what Jan talked about doing to water sports and going whitewater rafting, and we always have to laugh because whenever we go out to do something together like that, ultimately, I'm the one who's doing something wrong with her paddle. And Jan is like, okay, maybe she's not sure whether to tell me to stop paddling, right? But the point I'm trying to make, really honestly, is, even if it's just getting us in the canoe where we need to go, right, it takes both of us. We've got to have mutual support to get to the goal. And here's what happens in times of crisis. We unknowingly shift towards an inward mindset. Our eyes come up off of the horizon and come down onto our navel, and it's all about me. How is this affecting me? And so the other thing that happens inadvertently is we start to blame others for our frustrations, or maybe we feel victimized by our circumstances. So that survival mode is really so dangerous because it blinds our eyes both to the collective need and to the collective strength that's available to meet that need. So our solution, of course, again, this is not going to be a news flash to you. It's just good to get the reminder because we forget some of the basic things in crisis. And that's our solution to that inward mindset is to what? Of course, reinvigorate that outward mindset that embraces team synergy and the truth that we really are stronger together. So I encourage you as leaders, you've got to model and encourage your team to engage in both the actions and the attitudes that reflect that they're for one another. Your team needs to know that you are for them, and each teammate needs to know that their teammates are for them. This is particularly important if you've got folks on your team that are been slow to jump back in. Fear just makes people self-protective. So moving them from that inward fearful mindset into this outward mindset that's other-centered and focused on collective results, i.e. your win is my win, that's going to rebuild trust in both the people and the process. But mutual support also means mutual accountability. So what I have found to be true is that accountability that's encouraged and enforced by an army of peers is far more effective than this top-down, drop the hammer. Once the teams had an ample opportunity to grieve their losses, that's why we started with compassion right? Your team has to feel like they've been heard. They have to have had opportunity to grieve their losses. But once they've had that opportunity, there comes a point where they just have to flat embrace being part of the now that's moving forward. We can show up on the other side of this better and stronger than ever before, but it's going to take all hands on deck. And that message rings clearest and shines brightest when it comes from within the team itself. So, simple mutual support tools like ask for help, offer help, or 5-to-1 feedback. Those things are going to reinforce the truth that I only get to the goal when we get to the goal.
Rhonda is telling you the exact truth. And in fact, I see in the chat box, Richard mentioned that when we're paddling, we have to paddle all together. Otherwise, we'll lose somebody. It's really an interesting thing about team dynamics in a boat. You really need to be in sync. One of the things that can keep you in sync is to regain that team voice. I am a coach champion for our safety program at our hospital, and I asked the coaches, and I said, how are your huddles going? And they said, we're not having them. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked because we've hardwired that morning huddle. And so I asked the clinic manager, I said, so can you tell me about your huddles? Again, ask a good question. Can you tell me about your huddles? What are they like right now? And she said, gosh, we mask up and we stand 6 feet apart and we pull part of the key parts of the team out into the parking lot so we can all be together, socially distanced. And we tell them, okay, hashtag, not a team voice. We tell them the changes for today and then we break go back to work. And I said, oh, so you've lost the team voice in the huddles. And her face was like, oh, yeah, it's not a feedback loop. We have lost the huddle as a feedback loop. We made it a directive place in crisis, and we didn't re-engage the team voice in the huddle. So let's just go through the little list here I've got on the left, is that in crisis, voices get lost. And we'll be talking about it in the future slides. But for resilience, you need to build in hardwire things where the team voice never gets lost, because the event dominates your perspective and overcomes the team voice. I've been in healthcare a long time, over 35 years, and we've had other tsunamis that have happened. In fact, think about, we used to think Epic was going to electronic medical charting was a huge deal. Now we're like, oh, piece of cake compared to what we're doing now, right? The event dominates, and we begin to think of that, and we extinguish the team voice, not on purpose, but by accident. But I'm telling you right now, take time to re-engage the team voice. Be very intentional about giving their voices back. Think about briefs, huddles, shared governance, UBC, what other committees you've got on. I find that one-on-one leadership grounding is one of the most effective tools. Make sure that your staff sees you. The higher up in management you are, the more you just need to be seen walking the halls so people can engage. Ask great questions. How's your family? How is homeschooling going? That's a new project for everybody. Whatever you're going to talk about, but they need to see you as being open to their voice, that the feedback loop is returning, that they have some control over their world. And that's about putting the paddle in, right? Regaining your confidence. Be brave. Some of those conversations are not going to be pretty. Just be warned. Go in, wear a raincoat if you need to, but take notes and look for themes. When you're over a unit or over a system, make sure that you're looking for the themes that your staff is really challenged with. And hear what they're proud of. Rhonda already touched about it in the debrief, but one of the resilience tools is to remind them that they have actually accomplished a lot. So celebrate that, and hear what they're proud of, celebrate it, make it famous in a newsletter or photos. That's what I've been doing recently, is taking photos and writing up news articles for our hospitals to do this behavior of hearing and making famous what they're proud of.
So our last kind of tool for resilience here, when you're trying to get your team back in the boat, is to engage them with a quick win. So what do I mean by that? Well, once your team has regained their voice, you've got to reinforce that they've been heard and that their ideas actually make a difference. And the best way that I know how to do that is to get a win in their pocket just as fast as possible. So what's something that you can implement right away that will get results and make your team feel empowered again? Maybe it's something that you started prior to the pandemic that has to be put on a back burner. So here's some of the discouragement that Jan and I have heard from the leaders, is that they feel like, they had all this momentum on some of these projects and things that they were doing pre-COVID-19, and then COVID-19 starts and everything comes grinding to a halt, right? All these things that the leaders were excited about or the staff was excited about, it got put on the back burner. And what we're hearing from leaders is a lot of you are worried that it will never make it to the front burner ever again. So let me just give you an example of, honestly, you don't necessarily need to abandon everything that you were doing pre-COVID. In fact, when you look at finding a quick win for your team, it's quite possible that it's one of those things that you started on pre-COVID that might be your easiest grab and your quickest win going forward. So, for example, in the emergency department where I still pick up shifts, the last few months have been a real morale sinker. I'm guessing we are not alone. It's an ER. I think our clinic nurses probably felt very much the same way. Front lines. And it's a vulnerable place to be during a pandemic. We, like every other healthcare facility on the face of the planet, we're kind of having to make it up on the fly in this extremely dynamic landscape that we're living in. I think about, you probably all know what it feels like to know or to have that what you knew this morning or thought you knew this morning was already updated, redone, and retooled before you even come back from lunch. That's just kind of the state of the world right now. But what happened in my team is that was getting them overwhelmed and fearful. Things felt completely out of their control. They lost their voice. And what happened? What happened in response? They became very poorly behaved. Now, how are we going to get them back? So prior to the COVID explosion this spring, as a trauma coordinator, I had been preparing my team to transition from a paper flow sheet to an electronic EMR-type trauma narrator for charting on a trauma activation. And this is something the whole team was super excited about and anxious to do, doctors and nurses alike. This was going to be a big win on several fronts. But when the pandemic struck, all the trainings got axed. All our preparations came grinding to a halt, and the go-live date got shut down. That was hugely disappointing, especially for me. I was the one who had been driving this project, and I'm telling you what, it was so close I could taste it, and I knew what a big deal it was going to be for our team. So as things began to stabilize for us in our COVID landscape, I talked to the ED manager, kind of expressing my concern for the low morale and that I felt that our staff needed a win to get their overboard team back in the boat. And I personally thought restarting this trauma EMR project would be an easy grab and a quick success for the team. So even though we were a little nervous to launch anything new, because things were hardly back to normal, right? We'd stabilized a little bit, but we were a far cry from normal. So we were nervous, but I was looking for a slam dunk for the team that I knew would get them encouraged and empowered again. And so I convinced her to let us go forward and implement implement this new system. And I got to tell you, it worked like a charm. We went live on the new system. The nurses were happy. The docs were ecstatic. And the whole tenor of the department just kicked it up a notch. Why? Because it was their felt need, their devised solution, and their success. That's the beautiful thing about a quick win. It empowers the early adopters, it encourages the mostly convinced, and it enlightens the late adopters. There's just something irresistible about that taste of victory, and that's going to be a critical tool to getting your whole team back in the boat.
I totally agree with you, Rhonda. Thank you for your story. And Michelle in the chat box is asking for any other quick win examples that you have experienced that maybe we could share with one another. And I liked Evan's response was start every meeting and huddle with a win. And that idea about briefs, huddles, and debriefs are really going back to that team engagement, that team culture, that team celebrate. Don't forget to celebrate with great catches. So put that in the chat box to share with your colleagues around the nation so we can just learn from your success. Let's go to the third thing to think about. So we have looked at compassion and slowing down enough for the team. We've looked at confidence, about getting that first win, that quick win, that reestablishing the voice, the feedback loop of the voice. And now I want to talk about setting challenges. And this is really that forward idea of creating resilience, because you not only need the quick win, you also need the long-term win. When you go river rafting, what happens is the harder the wave, the harder the experience, the deeper you have to dig. You can see in the photo that they are in the middle of a rapid and how committed and how driven this team is. If you get their confidence built back on a quick win, then you can go back to some things that may be required or important to you. And this idea of dig deep, pull forward, that's the kind of things that builds this resilient team to say, hey, we accomplished that. Take a breath, celebrate. We can do the next thing. And really the next thing, we don't even know. It could be even harder. We don't know. Some of our colleagues here are already experiencing this. So let's look at some specific resilience tools. Some of them you may have already thought about, but let me just bring them back to mind. It's not new information. It's just applying this information to this concept. Leaders, please recast the vision. Please show people where they're going. When people have that inward focus, like Rhonda talked about before, they have lost the long-term focus. Bring people back to the long-range focus. Where are we going in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, a year? Help them to see the long arc of success that they're taking on those big issues. Rebuild their confidence and trust in the team itself and what you can accomplish together. That's critical to forward progress. People will stall out either because they are in shock or anger, and they'll stall out there. They'll also stall out on the quick wins where they go, oh, that was good, and then they're happy to stay there. You need to rebuild this confidence and this momentum so you can handle the next tsunami or the next sneaker wave. May I recommend that whether it's on a quick win or a long-term win, the thing that healthcare teams can all agree on is the why we got into healthcare was the patient. We're in healthcare, no matter what your role is, because we care. We're a caring profession. And so you could be in nursing or administration or housekeeping or be taking temperatures at the door. It's because we care about the patient that we are motivated to do really hard things. So on your first long-term vision, I really encourage you to rebuild that vision around the patient. Re-engage their why. Build it down. So it's not just another thing. It's attached to patients and their perception and their safety and their growth and their comfort, and everyone's afraid. So build it around that, and then make sure that you are engaging the voice so that the initiative that you want to see going forward for the long haul is staff-driven, has some staff solutions in it, and then it's leading towards the longer goals that are on your list to do. But the first long-term goal, the first recasting the vision, really attach it to what we all care about, which is the patient. One of the tools I use in some of our training or re-engaging this is that I tell stories about when I've been a patient and what happened to me and what got missed, or, or maybe it's me as a caregiver and saying things like, wow, this is what it feels like to be a caregiver in a system that feels like the change is too much. Rebuild it about the patient. Sometimes the patient is your staff, to be honest with you. So when you have had a team that's under pressure and you've responded in compassion and you've responded in building their confidence, and you still have people stuck, and stuck looks like anger, blame, rage, complaining. It's really fingers out, it's your fault on something that isn't. May I really encourage you leaders to stop and throw one more life jacket out for that employee. Let's be realistic, is that we have employees that are really stuck, and they may not make it back, but they are worth it to go out and throw them one more life jacket. Now, granted, it's up to them to put it on, but to go to staff that is still angry and is yelling or badly behaved, that is not professional behavior. Stand up for the rest of your team. Make sure that you are containing that in compassion. Perhaps they need some counseling that your organization offers. Perhaps they just need one-on-one time with you once a week for 10 minutes. Go after that staff. Don't let them keep affecting your team. The team cannot pull forward if there's someone not in sync and pushing back on the battle. We've all been in teams like that. Be brave, do the brave leadership thing, and have the one-on-one conversation with them to help get them back in the boat. See what their need is. And again, some people on our team are not going to be able to come back into the boat. Maybe the thing that happened to your team was just too big, and they will be more peaceful someplace else. I want to give you some leadership strategies, or these are thoughts that I just want you to think about and give yourself maybe some homework to do, maybe apply it to your own unit, apply it to your own life. Here's the leadership strategies that I've been thinking about, and there are many more. These are the ones that I've been thinking about. Under pressure, any kind of pressure, under any team, actually the leaders, the natural leaders will surface. I want you to think back in the last tsunami that hit your team, where all the team was out of the boat, and I want you to think through individuals on your team and say, who is it? Who is it that rose to the top above all others? Now, that is a leader that you want to pour into, because they are the leader of your future. Number 2, look for projects that are successful. Look for where the felt need is. Look for where people are driving things forward and people are excited about it, or it really changes. Rhonda told a story in the ER about that one little thing actually was a project that hit the quick win and touched everybody on the team. Look for projects like that. And then, of course, there's some that you just have to do. But look to start with the projects that everybody will experience the win. Some of your team, maybe you yourself, are in denial that this is our new normal. So some of the projects, like your safety initiative or your, some of the other things that you're doing are now going to be done for the near future, maybe the long-range future, in a completely different way. This is an opportunity. You could see it as a threat for sure, but it's an opportunity to reimagine things we've done, make them fresh, include new voices, rebuild how we do that. Some of your stressors are over regaining people over an electronic format. Reimagine, learn some tools, like move forward in those ideas and reimagine how you do what you're already doing before. I want you to write down, what are you looking for? Look for leaders, projects, or looking to reimagine. This is completely up to you. Give yourself a self-assignment so you finish today's webinar with something you're going to activate. Just a summary slide, really, a reminder of that idea about setting forth challenge, because we're going to build and celebrate a new normal. You can look behind you as you paddle, but you'll get off course. So you want to look forward to the shore. You want to look at the tide comes back in with effort. It's often higher than when it went out. So teams actually grow under pressure if you nurture those leaders that shine. Creativity is released when you huddle and regain that team voice. New leaders emerge, pour into that, and then just the honesty of that some staff isn't going to make it. It's really up to you to set the stage and cast the vision.
So as we close, there's an ancient proverb that says, "For as a man thinks within himself, so he is." That quote, it's always been a great reminder to me that how I choose to think about something is actually what gives it its creative power. I can choose to dwell on my losses, hunker down in self-protection, and effectively sink the ship, or I can reinvent, regain team synergy, and row towards brighter horizons. So our question to you today is, will you allow whatever's bumped your team off course to sideline you as a threat, or will you embrace it as an opportunity to rise strong? Don't get stuck in playing the old tapes of what didn't go well. Grieve the loss and then give that negativity a proper burial. It's time to reframe. As Jan said earlier, hard is just hard. It's not a deal breaker. The challenges before your team may be the very platform that they need to showcase their creativity, their ingenuity, and their ability to shine brighter than ever before. It's time to get back in the boat and embrace the possibilities.
So here's our review slide. The key takeaways are: start with compassion. Recognize that they've been blown out of the water, and you have too, but slow down. Recover the people, including yourself. Just slow down. Show compassion. And then go and rebuild confidence. Take a small stroke to regain momentum. Just start with a quick win. Regain the voice. And then be thinking about the long-term vision, the challenge that is going to build a strong and resilient team that wraps this team up into this idea that we are stronger together, we conquered that, and we can do the next great thing. So, Jen, we'll let you take it from here, or Chris.
Thank you so much, Jan and Rhonda. That was an amazing presentation. I think it was exactly what people needed right now, and it really shows that the two of you are honestly national leaders in this conversation on leadership and change management. So I really appreciate it. It was awesome. We are at the top of the hour, so I just want to make some final reminders here. The evaluation is going to be coming to everybody in their email shortly. We'd love for you to fill that out. We always review those. Continuing education, information's up on the screen right now. Once we close this webinar, that's when you can go in and start texting that code to the phone number you see on the screen to be able to receive CE credit. We are tomorrow having a online chat on Mighty Networks with both Jan and Rhonda. So we would love it if you could join us for that. That is going to be a lot of fun, and we can get some of your questions that we didn't get answered today. It's at 11 Eastern Time, 10 Central. So please join Jan, Rhonda, and the AHA Team Training Team for that. I'd also like to thank Craig Ahrens and Karev for joining us today and for being able to sponsor this webinar and help bring all of this information to you. So make sure you check out them as well. Without further ado, I'd like to say thank you all for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's presentation. You may disconnect your phone lines, log off your webinars, and thank you for joining us this afternoon.